Good evening, everyone. I am Councillor Laura Binks, Mayor of Strathbogie Shire Council. I would like to welcome you all to this ordinary council meeting of 17th of May 2022. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the places we live, work and play. We recognise and respect the enduring relationship they have with their lands and waters, and we pay respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Today we are meeting on the lands of the Tangarang peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation, whose sovereignty here has never been ceded. It is with pleasure that we again welcome community members into the gallery following the lifting of some COVID-19 pandemic restrictions. We are still following good hygiene practices as required under current COVID regulations. I also wish to welcome those watching the live streamed meeting via our website. I want to take the opportunity to outline that voting at today's meeting will be held by a show of hands. If a councillor has a conflict of interest in a matter, they will be asked to leave the meeting and no discussion on the matter will commence until we are sure they have done so. Councillors will be contacted to rejoin the meeting after the matter has been considered and the vote concluded. For those members of the public gallery who have registered to speak to items to the agenda this meeting, I will call you forward when it is your time to speak. Can you then please come forward and sit in front of the microphone? You will need to turn it on when you do so. And so those watching can hear, those that are watching can virtually hear you. They might see the back of you, but they'll be able to hear you. You have 5 minutes to make your submission. A bell will ring at the 4-minute mark so that you know to focus on those last few points you wish to make. Councillors can ask you questions of clarification but cannot enter into any debate. CEO Salomon, are there any apologies for this evening's meeting?
Through you, Mayor, no, there are no apologies for the evening.
Thank you. Councillors and officers, are there any disclosures of conflicts of interest to be made under Rule 94 of Governance Rules and Division 2 of Local Government Act 2020? Councillor Rayburn.
Yes, I have a conflict at 9.5.2, a personal interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Are there any other conflicts of interest? Councillor Hourigan.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I have a general conflict of interest for item number 9.2.5, future acknowledgement of January 26 due to a personal conflict of interest.
Thank you, Councillor Hourigan. Director Tingay.
Thank you, Mayor Binks. I have a general conflict of interest in relation to item 9.2.1 due to a close family member being on the committee of the Ag Society for that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tingay. I wish to declare a material conflict of interest under section 128 of the Act for item 9.5.2 as it relates to an expense request for my attendance at the Australian Local Government National General Assembly in Canberra. And just clarifying, there were no further conflicts of interest that I missed? No? Okay, great. Thank you. Councillors, the minutes from the ordinary council meeting of 19th of April 2022 require a confirmation. Councillors, can I please have a motion? Councillor Rayburn.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move that the recommendation printed that the minutes of the council meeting held on the Tuesday the 19th of April 2022 be confirmed. I'd like to move that way.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hayes-Burke. Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. Can I see a show of hands? All those in favour? Okay, and against? No, and declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. CEO Salomon, do we have any petitions to be tabled this evening?
Through you, Mayor, no, there are no petitions for this evening's meeting.
Thank you, CEO Salomon. Councillors, would you like to make any reports to tonight's meeting? Councillor Hayes-Burke.
Thanks. Just a short one, Mayor. I just wanted to let the community know we had this last week a fascinating discussion with Alistair Purbrick of Tabilk Wine Group, and he took us on his journey to becoming a carbon neutral vineyard, and it was really exciting, and also gave us some really incredible ideas, I think, how we can pursue and go down that avenue of eventually becoming a carbon neutral Shire, which leads us into where we've still got our climate action plan, the draft action plan out for the community to comment on. So it would be great if you could please comment on that. If you've got any other ideas, it's jam packed, so I don't think we've left anything off it. Also, we had a discussion with the Goulburn Broken Climate Alliance and Urban Forestry Group, and the project that the Strathbogie Shire was the lead on was called Naturally Cooling Our Towns, or something along those lines. But it gave us some really great data and evidence of how important tree canopy is in our towns for cooling, for health and wellbeing, for tourism. There's just so many aspects of why it's just is so beneficial, and also not to even mention climate change. And I just wanted to note in that report that the Urban Forestry Group mentioned that's the legacy that some community members have left by planting trees along our nature strips. There was a community tree planting project that happened a couple of years ago, and that they said that was an incredible example of the community working together to help solve problems, and that's a great legacy for our future generations. So thank you to the community members who are involved in that. And also they were volunteers, which leads me on to this week is National Volunteer Week, and I just wanted to reflect on the role of many volunteers in our society and thank them immensely for all their hard work. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haysberg. Did any other councillor wish to make a... Councillor Murray?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to mention a couple of things that have happened over the last month, which have been pretty busy for many of us in the community. We had, of course, our Anzac Day services since our last meeting, and they went off really well, particularly the one at Longwood and Avenel, which I went to. And it's great to see some young people organising it down at Longwood and organising such a great event with a march and so on. We had to meet the Candidates Forum, which I think a lot of people in the community appreciated and went along to, organised by the Uriah Community, the Action Group, and Laura Baker in particular. I want to commend her for her efforts in organising that. It was a great night. We had a Uriah Community Outreach event, which was run by the National Recovery and Resilience Agency on May the 2nd, and lots of farmers and so on were invited along in our agricultural community, and I know that they got a lot out of that from speaking to them on the day. I attended a renewable Avenel energy meeting down on May the 5th, where they're organising some strategic planning at a meeting with some people from Yakandanda, and I think Kate was down there, Kate Orty, who's in the gallery there, was with us down there, and it was a great event as well. We caught up with some of the Mitchell Shire councillors and had a get together over there and made some networking opportunities over at Nagambie, which was greatly appreciated. And lastly, I'd like to echo Councillor Hayes-Burke's comments about the volunteers. I went down there today at Avenel for an event down there to celebrate all the great volunteers down at Avenel, and it was a terrific day at the Bowls Club down there. So it's been a busy month. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Did anyone else wish to make a report? No? Okay. Strap in, mine's coming. I wish to remind everyone of Council's Charter of Mutual Respect. Over the weekend, we saw disrespectful comments on social media directed towards Councillor Sally Haysberg. Whilst people can disagree with an agenda item or recommendation, we request and expect that you treat councillors respectfully. It is not okay to make personal attacks towards individuals, nor threaten and bully councillors on a matter. Today is International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia and Transphobia. discrimination, and collectively they create the acronym IDAHOBIT. And I'm proud to share and celebrate this day as the Mayor of a region of natural beauty with vibrant communities who are respectful, optimistic and inclusive. This past month, I've attended the Southern Aurora 60th anniversary commemoration, a viewing of Tank and Tobin's sculpture workshop in Longwood, Yarnbark course to learn about acknowledging country meaningfully, the Aroa Community Outreach event at the Memorial Oval, which was hosted by the Federal Government National Recovery and Resilience Agency and lots of the locals, including our Rotary Club. We all met with the Mitchell Shire councillors, the mayor and councillors, which was a really great opportunity to develop those cross-council relationships. I've met with the Tangarang Land and Waters Council, and there's been many things as well. I won't go through them all. Yesterday I was in Violet Town and today I was in Avenel for our National Volunteer Week 2022 events to acknowledge and thank and show support for our volunteers across the Shire of Strathbogie. I further encourage the community to attend the Aroa, Longwood and Nagambie events. They are yet to take place on Wednesday and Friday this week respectively, and all are welcome to attend. You also get a free ticket to the cinema, which is opening very soon. Further to this, I am pleased to share that I've been appointed to the Rural Council's Victoria Committee, which will meet once a month and of which Strathbogie Shire Council are a member. Rural Councils Victoria represent 37 member councils and is a dedicated body to supporting and promoting sustainable, livable, prosperous rural communities through policy, advocacy, awareness, campaigns and local government initiatives. I would like to take this opportunity to invite everyone in the community to provide feedback on Council's draft budget 2022-2023 and the Council Plan Review, the draft asset plan and developing a climate change action plan. You can do this online by visiting www.share.strathbogie.vic.gov.au. In particular, I would like to take the opportunity to urge you to pledge your support for climate action by signing our wall of support, also on the Share Strathbogie website. Share Strathbogie provides project information, background context and fact sheets that are easy to read and accessible. All contributions are valued and help to shape the future direction and outcomes of our region. This platform is a safe space and I encourage everyone to participate. Thank you for coming along or watching online and for engaging in the projects, actions and initiatives that Council are working to deliver for the community. CEO Solomon, are there any questions from the public this evening?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, we have several questions relating to items on the agenda this evening. The first question is from Philip Storwald from Euroa, who asks two questions. His first question, I'm not sure why you want to change the signage, removing the historical references to our great VC winners. Please explain. In response, thank you for your question, Philip. Please be assured our corporate brand renewal has been created to reflect our community's vision for the future and to better represent the heart and soul of our Shire. Our aim is to instil pride in Strathbogie Shire and reflect a council that is connected, natural and contemporary. A municipality that offers it all. A place where good things grow, that's families, community, produce and business. This change is to our corporate branding and town entry signage. This means the signs on the border of our municipality and the council entry signage into our townships. It does not attempt to change any of the very special township signage we see, for example, the Welcome to Violet Town sign designed by Michael Lulig, or the beautiful sculpture signage in Longwood, or the signage into Euroa. We have certainly heard the importance of the VC signage to many in our community and will work with them to ensure that this continues in some form. Philip, your second question is, The proposed new signage has no relevance or meaning. How is it better than the great VC winners and the history it represents? In response to your question, Philip, yes, I'm thinking, have I got the right response to this? And I do. The Strathbogie Shire brand renewal ensures Council is contemplating completing Action 1.1.5 of Council's 2021-25 Council Plan. It will provide a more consistent, professional and innovative approach to branding and marketing to strengthen our corporate identity. We used our community vision as a brief, and the renewed design achieves this. The font and the use of the S represent the landscape of Strathbogie Ranges, the meandering paths of our rivers, creeks and streams. The deep purple colour reflects the colour that can be seen across the Shire as the sun sets over the ranges. In particular, the flexible elements will allow Council to promote the Shire and individual townships. As I mentioned previously, this is our corporate brand. It does not attempt to replace any of the community-inspired township signage. Thank you, Philip. We also have a question from Graham Pollard of Nagambie, who asks, rebranding strategy. Please advise when the proposed rebranding strategy and associated artefacts were put on public display for the community engagement and feedback. So in response to your question, Graham, the brand renewal was included as an action in our council plan after our biggest and most comprehensive community engagement plan to deliver the community vision and council plan. The brand renewal was included as an action in our draft council plan under Strategic Focus Area 1, Engage, Create, Unite. This plan was subject to public consultation before the final council plan was adopted at a special council meeting. Council officers have tested the brand strategy with Council's Tourism, Arts and Cultural Advisory Group. This group provided support for the brand strategy and updated logos. We have not put our corporate branding strategy out for broader consultation. However, we are keen to work with our community to further develop their community-inspired township signage. This is separate to the corporate brand strategy we are talking about tonight. There are also two questions submitted by Kate Orty of Euroa, who asks, firstly, changing the date for Australia Day celebrations. Noting the special place accorded Aboriginal people in the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities 2006 and the obligation which that Act places on local government, what steps are being taken to comply with Section 18, which describes participation of Aboriginal people and all community members in public affairs as a fundamental human right? In response, and the second question, changing the date for Australia Day celebrations. Noting the special place accorded Aboriginal people in the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities 2006, what steps are being taken to comply with Section 19, which describes the recognition of cultural rights as a fundamental human right? So in response, thank you to your questions, Kate. We've provided one response in relation to both of your questions. The report on the agenda is intended to start formal consultation process with Strathbogie Shire community in regards to the way in which Council marks January 26 out of respect for First Nations people. As presented in the Council report, Option 1 would support Council to meet its obligations under Section 18 and 19 of the Victorian Charter of Human Rights 2006. This option is also consistent with the community vision and the inclusivity goals developed by the Strathbogie Shire community with specific reference to respect, inclusion and First Nations people. It is the role of Council to provide governance and leadership for the local community through advocacy, decision-making and action. Under the Victorian Local Government Act 2020, we have a responsibility to deliver a range of essential programs and services that are accessible, equitable and meet the needs of the Strathbogie community. In addition, sections 55 through to 58 of the Act places a requirement on council to engage with the community and make decisions in a transparent manner consistent with council's adopted community engagement policy and public transparency policy. Further to this, section 8 of the Act states that council must act for the benefit and well-being of the municipal community. As a council, we have a legislative responsibility to ensure everyone's health and well-being under the Victorian Public Health and Wellbeing Act 2008 and foster human rights under the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities Act 2006, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultural rights. Thank you for your questions, Kate. Thank you, Mayor. That's the end of the questions for this evening.
Thank you, CEO Salomon. So we will now move to the first item on our agenda on page 1. It's item 9.1.1, planning permit application number 2020-127, 27 lot subdivision at 1 Sale Yard Road, Avenel. Manager Aitken, can we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Planning permit application P 2020-127 is for a 27-lot residential subdivision at 1 Sale Yard Road, Avenel. Lot sizes range from 400 square metres to 1,500 square metres. Officers have worked closely with the applicant to ensure an improved design for the proposed subdivision that incorporates a variety of lot sizes. The land is approximately 2.3 hectares in size and is currently vacant. The land is zoned for residential purposes and the proposal meets the relevant policy objectives of the planning scheme and the relevant zone controls. The land is located within Avenel's designated township boundary and is identified for infill residential development. The application was placed on public notice, it was advertised and 2 objections were received. Concerns outlined in the objections related to road and drainage infrastructure along Sale Yard Road. Conditions included in the officer recommendation will address these concerns. Since the writing of this report, 1 objection has been formally withdrawn. Officers have also received verbal communication from the remaining objector that their objections have been withdrawn. However, as of this date, nothing formal has been received in writing. The application has been assessed by officers and is recommended that Council resolve to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit. The recommendation is on page 1 for Council's consideration.
Thank you, Manager Aitken. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer for this matter? No? Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Dickinson?
Thank you, Mayor. I move the motion as on page 1 be accepted.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillors, is there a seconder? Councillor Rayburn?
Yes, I'll second the motion. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Councillor Rayburn, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Once again, council officers have worked very, very hard to ensure that what the development down at Avenel is going to suit the area. And I love the way that the lot sizes are going from 400 square metres up to 1,200. It allows all parts of our community to be able to buy land to build their house on. We can have people with small lots, which gives them an opportunity just to have small gardens for a single person or a senior person moving off the land, or to up to a family to have a larger lots. And I think that's well worked out, and that's what our community wants for us as a council, and that's what I'd love for every town in the Strathbogie Shire. So well done to the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Murray?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to thank the Planning Department for their work on this particular development. It'll be a good one for Avenel, I think. Avenel is growing very quickly. There are some challenges there for this development in this particular spot in terms of drainage and access, but I think they'll be handled appropriately, and I think they'll tie in quite well with future developments down there in Avenel. So thank you for your efforts, and I commend this to you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Don't think anyone else is wishing to speak. So, councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We will now move on to page 22 of the agenda, item 9.1.2, planning permit application number P2021-089, use and development of land for dwelling and access in an unnamed unmade road reserve for Crown Allotment 1 and 2, Section H at 7 Hills Close, Ruffy. Manager Aitken, can we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Planning permit application P2021-089 is for the use and development of land for a dwelling at Crown Allotment 1 and Crown Allotment 2, Section H, 7 Hill Close, Ruffy. The proposal will see the consolidation of the two Crown allotments, providing a parcel of 7,347 square metres. The application was advertised and 2 objections were received. Concerns outlined in the objections related to the ability of effluent disposal from the proposed dwelling to be treated and retained within the land. Conditions included in the officer recommendations address this concern. Since the writing of this report, 1 objection has been formally withdrawn in writing. Despite the land being located in the farming zone, the land is identified in the Council's rural residential strategy as being suitable for residential development. The application has been assessed by officers and it's recommended that the Council resolve to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit. The recommendation is on page 22 for Council's consideration.
Thank you, Manager Aitken. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? Councillor Haysbert.
Thanks. Manager. So the unmade road reserve, that's going to be dealt with by the developers, isn't it? They're going to build the road.
Correct, Councillor. So the recommendation of officers is a condition included in the report that requires the upgrade of that road prior to the occupation of any dwelling on the land. It's actually one of 4 applications for the land known as 7 Hill Close, Ruffy. There's a number of different parcels in that area, so as part of all those permits, they'll be required to upgrade the road prior to occupation of any dwelling.
Thanks. Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. Councillor Rayburn.
Just on that one, if I wouldn't mind, Manager, who keeps the upkeep of that road, please?
So once the road is constructed to Council standards, it will be Council's responsibility to maintain the road.
Thank you. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Dickinson, thank you.
No one else puts a hand up. I would like to move the motion as set out on page 22.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Do I have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Murray, thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Councillor Dickinson, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, it ticks all the boxes.
Thank you. Councillor Murray? No. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Hourigan?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I did read the objection that was submitted, but and while I empathise with them, I'm very much satisfied that the officers here have done all that they can to ensure that doesn't come about for the objector. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hourigan. Councillors, I will now put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands? All those in favour, please. And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Okay, now moving on to page 35, which is item 9.1.3, planning applications received and planning applications determined 1 to 30 April 2022. Manager Aitken, can we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I refer you to page 35 of the agenda, where it was noted there were 11 new planning applications received and 11 planning permit applications decided upon during the reporting period, which was the 1st to the 30th of April 2022. A mixture of applications were received during the reporting period, including a number of applications for new dwellings and also for residential subdivisions. The recommendation is on page 35.
Thank you, Manager Aitken. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please? And can you state what your motion is? Councillor Hourigan.
Thank you. So I'd like to move the motion that we adopt the recommendation on page 35 of the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Rayburn. Is there any opposition to the motion? Okay. Would you like to speak to the motion? No. Councillor, no. Would any councillor like to speak to this motion? No. Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? Against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. And we'll now move on to page 37 of the agenda, item 9.1.4, elevating environmentally sustainable development ESD targets. Manager Aitken, can we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So Strathbogie Shire is a member of the Council Alliance for Sustainable Built Environment. This is known as CASPI. Strathbogie Shire has been collaborating with CASPI in partnership with a group of 31 other councils across Victoria in working on the Elevating Environmentally Sustainable Development Targets planning project. So stage one of this project saw the preparation of new environmentally sustainable development standards. The purpose of this report is to seek approval to participate in stage two of the project. Stage two of the project seeks to introduce new development standards into the planning schemes of the participating councils via a planning scheme amendment. The planning scheme amendment process will seek an advisory committee to be appointed by the Minister for Planning to facilitate this amendment process. The advisory committee will also allow for public participation in the process. Benefits of this process will include a significant cost and resource reduction for participating councils. If approval is given, a memorandum of understanding will be entered into between the participating councils and CASPI in order to guide the planning scheme amendment process. The recommendation is on page 37 for Council's consideration.
Thank you, Manager Aitken. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer regarding this item? Councillor Rayburn?
Yes, Manager. What's this going to really mean to us as a council, and what cost savings would we have out of this?
Yeah, so cost savings probably first will be significant. To prepare an amendment of this nature by ourselves, Strathbogie Shire Council, you're looking at about $400,000. To participate in this process with hopefully the 31 other councils, sort of minimum cost might be $5,000 to maximum about $20,000, just depending on how many sign on. So the real benefit will be an introduction of a new planning provision into the planning scheme for new commercial, industrial, residential development that will help enforce those environmental sustainable targets. So,
thank you.
Yes, Councillor Murray.
Manager Aitken, I think these targets sort of can be grouped into a number of categories, and they will allow us to improve the livability of people in those developments. What sort of categories do they look at in these targets? Yeah, so operational energy is the first one. So things such as renewable energy, capturing sunlight, avoiding the use of natural gas. There's also embodied carbon, so looking at using recycled content, more durable materials that can be recycled and reused into the future. It also looks at sustainable transport, so providing additional bicycle parking and electronic vehicle charging stations. It looks at the reuse and capture of stormwater, providing greener infrastructure, better landscaping, looking at climate resilience, so reducing urban heat through additional landscaping. And then there's the waste and resource recovery, so developments looking at having separate areas for the storage of grass and green waste and that collection, so nothing's going to landfill. Thank you.
Are there any further questions to Manager Aitken on this matter? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Rayburn.
Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation on page 38 that Council requested the Minister of Planning and Housing establish an advisory committee to advise the Environmental Sustainable Development Project in accordance with Section 51 of the Planning Environment Act 1987 and all the other parts of that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hayes-Burke. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Councillor Rayburn, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I would love to. We've been asked as a Shire to look at climate change and see how we can work towards benefiting our community and saving costs and saving the community and ourselves as a organisation and a corporate identity to save money. This is one of those. We're looking here at, as our manager just stated, for us as an individual council to go and do something like this to benefit our community was going to cost us around $500,000. It's now only going to cost us $5,000 to $20,000, which I think the community should be so grateful, benefit, and think that something we are doing here is very positive to try and help our community. And I just put this forward as a great idea.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Councillor Hayes-Burke, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Rayburn, and not to mention that the Local Government Act states that we must mitigate and adapt to climate change. So, and it's well known that the area of development is something that contributes significantly to climate change. So having these environmentally sustainable development requirements will help minimise energy, waste, water, and ultimately minimise the running costs for our community. So yeah, thanks for taking the initiative. It's I think the benefits are tenfold.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Do any of the councillor wish to speak to the item? Nope. Councillors, I will put the motion to the vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We will now move to item on page 48, and Director Tingay is leaving the room as she has declared a general conflict of interest on this item. So I'll just wait for the doors to close. Apologies, those online. So we're now at item 9.2.1, application for sponsorship 2022 Victorian Agricultural Society State Convention. Director Bray, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Council has received an application for sponsorship from the Seymour Agricultural and Pastoral Society for their annual convention, which is held in June. They've asked for $5,000 from our sponsorship fund. They've said that they'd use the funds to help cover the costs of regional tours, printing and promotion, the regatta centre hire in Nagambie, and also local produce promotions. It would be the first time that the Agricultural Society has held their annual convention in our Shire. So under our sponsorship program guidelines, you can actually apply for sponsorship if you're outside of an organisation that's outside of the Shire. But we're doing an assessment against our sponsorship program criteria, and it's scored 15 out of 25, which satisfies the guidelines in terms of sponsorship. So we also believe that the event will result in significant social and economic benefits to the Shire and will be delivered in line with our events and regulatory policies and procedures, of course, including being a WasteWise event. So in our budget, we have $30,000 for sponsorship. We've already expended $20,000 of that, so we have $10,000 left. The recommendation on page 48 is that we don't provide all of that $5,000 in funding. We actually provide them with $3,000, and we also cover in kind the hire of the regatta centre, which is around $1,400. And also on page 49, the recommendation goes on to talk about being a WasteWise event, and to make sure that if there are any COVID directions that are made by the Minister for Health, that the event is compliant with those regulations at the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bray. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer for this item? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please? And Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the motion on page 48 and 49 of the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Horrigan. Is there any opposition? No. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's great that we get these events into our Shire, and to get one from another municipality, if you like, or another Shire, and be able to showcase what we have here to outsiders is also a benefit. So I think it'll be a great thing for the Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Horrigan, would you like to speak to the motion?
Sure, thank you, Mayor Binks. So I think it's great to take any opportunity with conventions and agriculture and field days such as this, and I will take any opportunity to bring delegates in here from the agriculture industry to showcase our Shire and everything it has to offer, and what they've got planned looks, really good, and it's a big benefit to the town, especially after what's happened for the COVID years. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour? And against? Okay, I declare that carried. We will now ask Director Tingay to rejoin the meeting. Oops, need to turn the page. So we will now move to page 54 of the agenda, item 9.2.2, curbside transition planning, 4-bin configuration, community engagement outcomes. Director Roth, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. As part of state government policy, Recycling Victoria has a 10-year plan. One part of that is the introduction by 2030 of a 4-bin waste and recycling system. Major difference being the inclusion of glass collection separate. So we developed 3 options and went through a community engagement process, which included a survey where we had 809 responses, which was really solid. Of those, scenario 1 received the most support, which is basically the collection service as is now, but the addition of monthly glass collection. Now, our contract for collection actually doesn't expire until June 2025, so any new arrangement would start from July 2025. We've already started work on procurement and a new contract in conjunction with some other councils, because there's a fairly long lead time to get that developed. So the recommendation is that we note the results of the survey and adopt the scenario 1, which received the greatest number of votes or support. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? Nope. Councillors, can I have a motion, please? And can you state what your motion is? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I move that we accept the recommendation for curbside collections as listed on page 54-55 of the agenda?
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hayes-Burke, thank you. Is there any opposition to this motion? No. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Murray?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just briefly to say it's a great example of a community engagement process, and it was surprising, I suppose, that the community picked this particular one. In a way, I suppose it was surprising because it's not the cheapest one, so it will cost a little bit more for this sort of collection, but I'm pleased to see this particular result from the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Hayes-Burke, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I thought this one was quite tricky because I initially thought that the community would choose the least costly option, but they've decided to choose the more environmentally friendly option, which I applaud them for. So this will probably lead to less contamination within our bins. And yeah, we were so grateful for the huge engagement. There was like 800 responses or something. So that was incredible. And yeah, it's going to be a tricky and costly rollout when the time comes. So I don't envy officers for having to organise all that. But yeah, thanks so much for your input.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I will put the motion to the vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against? Did you miss it?
You can take it.
All right. You got in. I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We will now move to page 66 of the agenda, item 9.2.3, review of rules for waterways. Director Roth, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So Council is the manager of the waterway, being the Goulburn River between Hughes Creek and the Goulburn Weir and also Lake Ngambie. And over the years, changes to boating technology, increased leisure time and proximity to Melbourne has increased the number of powered and non-powered vessels that we've had sharing the waterway, which has in turn triggered safety concerns for both visitors and the community. So we needed to undertake a review of the waterway rules to better meet the demand for access, improve safety and plan for sustainable growth. So we've been through an extensive process over the last couple of years, which has been a little delayed by COVID. Some of the things that we've done, we undertook a review of risks. Some of the issues that were identified were the need for clear, consistent, safe and intuitive speed zones, the need to reduce unrestricted speed on Lake Ngambie and sections of the river, lack of understanding and compliance with speed and distance rules, providing functional aids to navigation, managing the impacts of large wakes on other waterway users and managing riverbank erosion. So those were some of the risks that were identified. We prepared an issues paper. We also received funding from state government to do a bathymetric survey of the waterway, which is essentially a sonar arrangement under a boat looking at depths, hazards, which has informed where speed zones might be able to be altered. We've also had consultation with Marine Safety Victoria, several phases of community consultation, and the Council's Advisory Committee has been overseeing the review process. So where we've got to is proposing a number of changes which will need to be signed off by Marine Safety Victoria. Amongst those are reduction of speed limits, including a 20-knot limit on Lake Ngambie, simplifying the zones down to 3, which is a no-wake 5-knot zone, 20 knots and 30 knots, towed sports with limits on speed, prohibition on wake surfing, and what will be needed is education, signage, some enforcement, and also some additional buoys and markers which we have obtained some state money for, but we'll have to chase some more. So the recommendations are there for Council to consider, noting that they still have to go to Marine Safety Victoria to be signed off, and the committee will have one more session just to review one aspect of one of the speed recommendations before we send it off to MSV. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions of Director Roth on this matter? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Dickinson.
I'd like to move the recommendation as set out on page 67.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Do I have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hayes-Burke. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. And Councillor Dickinson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. It's been a long process. In fact, it started before my time on council, and the conclusions reached, I think, are really good. I've been sitting in on these meetings since I came on council, and there's been a lot of community input, and Officer Roth has come up with, after a lot of work on his behalf, on his part, he's come up with some great stuff. I just hope that once these rules and regulations are put in motion, that they can be policed and enforced. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Haysbert, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what Councillor Dickinson was saying. Too much credit. The process has been extensive, and it's not to be taken lightly, and it just shows that council is a lot more involved in a lot more than just road rates and rubbish. This shows the broad depth of stuff that we need to get involved in, and I just thank Director Rolfe for seeing this process through, and I also note that we did get quite a few of objections and submissions that we were required to read through in getting to this point. And I feel confident that the environmental issues with the no wake zones have been hopefully the concerns have been alleviated, keeping in mind that we do need to prioritise safety and the continual growth of our Shire. So thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No? Councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. So moving on to page 75, item 9.2.4, proposed Christmas decorations grant funding guidelines 2022. Director Tingay, can we have a summary of the report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. The establishment of the proposed Christmas decorations grant has resulted from the Pitch My Project initiative, where community could submit ideas for consideration as part of the draft 2022-2023 budget. As part of the submission process, a number of applications were received in relation to Christmas decorations. It is proposed to establish a grant opportunity where eligible community groups could apply for up to $5,000 to deliver Christmas decorations in main streets or public places. $30,000 has been allocated in the draft 2022-2023 budget for this grant program. This grant is for the purpose of Christmas decorations, as I've alluded to, which includes the purchasing, installation and decommissioning of decorations. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? Councillor Haysbert.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Director Tingay. So do applicants for this grant scheme need to detail the install and deinstall dates and methods by which they will undertake the erecting the decorations or whatever it takes?
Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. In the proposed guidelines, we haven't asked for applicants to detail that level. We certainly do know that installation and decommission dates do vary, and that depends on the placement and the nature of the actual decoration and what permits and permissions or consent may be required.
Did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so will council get to verify these sort of decorations before they go up as well as part of those guidelines?
Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. Permissions and approvals from the relevant landowner are required prior to the installation and decommission of those decorations. Maybe not in all circumstances will council be the responsible landholder or manager. It could be another authority, but we are asking that the eligible community groups do get that permission.
Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you. Just to clarify, these applications for these grants, they can't be made by an individual, they must be made by an organisation such as an action group or a Chamber of Commerce. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Yes, that is correct. Applications will be received from not-for-profit community groups, and individuals are ineligible to apply.
Were there any further questions to Officer? Yes.
Can I just clarify again that these decorations will be put up in public places, so public spaces, not private spaces. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Murray. Yes, as part of the proposed guidelines, there's a number of criteria that must be met, and the decorations are for the benefit for the wider community. So we're asking that they be in public places and spaces and in main streets as well.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Haysbert, do you have another question?
Another question?
Yes.
Do you think, well, I just want to know, does this grant scheme meet the inclusivity goals of the council vision?
So this grant program has been developed, as I've said earlier, in response to the Pitch My Project submissions that council received, and is intended for Christmas. So Christmas is obviously an annual festival commemorating the birth of Jesus Christ, and it's observed primarily on the 25th of December. So that is the purpose of the Christmas decoration program, around supporting the Christmas on the 25th of December.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Is there any further questions? No? Councillors, can I have a motion, and can you state what your motion is, please? Councillor Murray?
I'd like to move the motion that we adopt the recommendation as listed on page 75-76 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Haysbert. Sorry, Councillor Horrigan. I did see you. Councillor Horrigan is the seconder, just for clarification. It is what I wrote down. Is there any opposition to the motion? Councillor, now you've thrown me, Rayburn and Haysbert. Thank you. Councillor Murray, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a couple of points in support of this motion. It does come from Pitch My Project, so it's really about this council responding to the needs of the community as expressed through that process. It was an important process that we went out and engaged with the community with. We had a number of sort of like 47 or so, 50 responses, so we had a lot of them. And a number of them talked about Christmas, and they talked about decorations, and they talked about lighting. So there are a whole lot of things around that sort of theme. I think it's important that we respond to the needs of the community through that process, and I know that the business community, for example, here in Uriah is very keen to see some decorations up. They see it as an important aspect for the economic development and of the town during that period. They have a whole heap of decorations which were donated to them, which they're willing to share with various towns in the Shire to help them sort of decorate their main streets and create some vibrancy and economic activity during this period. I do note the concerns that some have expressed about it being Christmas and not particularly inclusive for some of our members of the community, but I do think it is largely celebrated in this community, and it's well worth supporting the town in developing that vibrancy and bringing extra business, in the hope that we don't have people moving, sort of taking their kids over to Shepparton to look at the lights over there, or up to Benalla or somewhere else. And I know both as a father and as a grandparent, I've taken my kids around to have a look at the lights and to some of the decorations around the place. So I do think it's important. I do think it's a way of supporting our community, and I would recommend this motion to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Horrigan, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. This proposed Christmas decorations grant is, of my opinion, the first for the Strathbogie Shire. So in my opinion, it's a trial. And so therefore I think it's a great idea, which means that if other groups wish to use it at different times of the year for their festivities, or you know, what they celebrate, then this is a good year to try out the funding guidelines and then move on from there. So I think it's good to start with. Everything that Councillor Murray said, I agree with. It's important to our community groups. It's important that we're showing that we are listening to them. Not just the Picture My Projects, but I had numerous phone calls last year from 3 different towns in our Shire about the lack of festivity that was in their town, and how they want more festivity because it brings joy and excitement at that time of year. So I also want to acknowledge that there's many volunteers that gather and create events around that time of year, and one of them's Carols by Candlelight. The other one Councillor Murray touched on, which is the business down the street. I know Ngambie do their own, and I feel that a funding grant guideline is a great way to show that as a council we support it as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Councillor Hayes-Burke.
Firstly, these guidelines are very specific to Christmas decorations, so we can't really trial them for other festive periods throughout the year, as much as it would be great to. And we just had one community group from Euroa who responded to Pitch My Project, and then there was one individual, I think from Ngambie, who responded to Pitch My Project in relation to Christmas decorations. And also I think the Christmas lights on people's houses is a totally separate issue. We're not talking about that here. So I just wanted to, say that I find it hard to support council spending ratepayers' money on Christmas decorations. I absolutely understand that this is a special time in the community for many. It's a special time for me as well. But I just think tonight that we can do better, fellow councillors. I think we can do better for our community. The community vision, which was written by the community panel, speaks to being respectful, optimistic and inclusive. I think that means that we should not be spending $30,000 of ratepayers' money on Christmas decorations that will probably likely end up in landfill. I want this place to be a welcoming, comfortable place for all people and for those that live here and who are visiting. Putting up Christmas decorations that even remotely evoke religion is just incompatible with inclusivity and diversity. And it's in direct contrast to our community vision, which we should be delivering for our community. My suggestion tonight would be something else, but I don't even think I'll get a chance to state that now. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Did anyone supporting the motion wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Andrews?
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that we're a very multicultural nation, and that's a good thing. However, we are predominantly of a Christian base, and Christmas has been part of our tradition for forever, I guess, and I think it would be divisive and non-inclusive if we were to not dispense with that, but to not continue to celebrate that. There are other opportunities for other groups to put forward to get grants for their celebrations and Ramadans and so forth. So I don't think it's being divisive or inclusive. I think if we were to not support it, it would be divisive and not inclusive.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Rayburn, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. It's not very often I speak about things like this, but I do tonight. This, to me, is just so blatantly against what we as a council are looking to go forward with. Inclusiveness, we've got a number of issues here tonight we're discussing, and this basically just goes against everything we're going to discuss for the rest of the night. There was a 40-foot container given to the community by a representative of our community last year, and now we're going to give extra, and they got that free, and now we're going to give the community $30,000 to put it up. What are the community? Can't the community do their own fundraising, do their own anything they can do to do this. Why is council always carrying the burden to put stuff together? There are grants out there from the arts thing and everywhere else, and go to the churches and get their money, because I'm sick and tired of throwing council money into stuff like this, and it does not suit the way we're going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Would anyone supporting the motion like to speak? No. The mover, Councillor Murray, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make just a couple of points. Firstly, that the applications for Pitch My Project came from two groups, not just one. So it was both the Community Action Group who applied and the Euro Business Chamber of Commerce that applied in a joint application for this particular grant. So there are two quite substantial groups within the community who are looking for some support, both economically, I suppose, in terms of us providing some support economically for them, so that they can put up these decorations and deinstall them after they've been put up. It's really not about purchasing a whole heap. They've got enough to give to other towns within the Shire. There will have to be some purchased, but there are guidelines in this sort of in this motion that talk about the longevity of the decorations and prioritising those things that last longer and are more recyclable. So I'm happy that will happen in this process, and I do think we should support our community. I'm not sick and tired of supporting them. That's what we're here for, and that's what I think we should be doing, providing financial assistance when it's needed for people, for this town and for the other towns within our area to develop and grow and, you know, be more vibrant and be a better place to live. So I'm not resiling from that, from my support of this motion. Thank you.
Oh, let me just check with governance rules. Rachel wants to speak. Yes, okay, thank you. Thanks.
Through the Mayor, it's unusual, but I suppose in the sake of having a robust debate.
Okay, but Councillor Murray will not be able to exercise his right of reply again.
Yeah, I suppose it would just be asking Councillor Murray.
Speaking in support of the motion.
Unfortunately, we asked, did anyone else want to make
I'll buy out them.
So, yeah, sorry.
You missed your opportunity. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. So, councillors, I will now put the motion to a vote. And can I see a show of hands for all those in favour? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We will now move on to page 80 of the agenda, item 9.2.5. Councillor Hourigan will leave the room. We'll wait for Councillor Hourigan to leave and for the doors to close. And so we're on to item 9.2.5, future acknowledgement of January 26. Director Tingay, can we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. At the October 2021 Council meeting, Councillor Hayes-Burke sought a report from officers regarding Council's role in January 26 activities in recognition of First Nations people. For First Nations Australians, January 26 marks the beginning of invasion and dispossession. Celebratory events can cause pain, suffering, and commemorate the loss of their sovereign rights to their land, loss of family, and loss of right to practice their culture. Historically, Strathbogie Shire has supported community-led Australia Day celebrations on January 26, with communities holding events that incorporate awards, entertainment and guest speakers, as well as the Shire providing Shire-wide Australia Day awards. The recommendation commencing on page 81 of the agenda seeks council endorsement to undertake consultation with Australia Day committees located in the Shire and broad community consultation around Strathbogie Shire's involvement in January 26. In addition, the recommendation also notes that officers would continue their communications with the registered Aboriginal parties in our local government area. The recommendation also seeks to consider a report on Council's position at an extraordinary meeting on the 28th of June this year. The recommendation is consistent and supports the MOU that Council signed last year with the Tangarung Land and Waters Council, and within that MOU, the principles include reconciliation and truth-telling. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? I would like to ask a clarifying question, Director Tingay. The current Australia Day committees apply for funding for their events through Council. Can you explain what will happen if Council were to not participate in January 26 events in the future and those committees and accessing funding, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Binks. So the National Australia Day Council has provided a grant opportunity to which Council has applied for over previous years. If Council were to withdraw their support or participation in the 26th of January, pending the funding eligibility and criteria, but based on previous years, the community groups or the Australia Day committees could apply directly to the National Australia Day Council for funding to be able to support their events. As I said previously, it will depend on the funding guidelines that would come out in the respective year, but previous years they have been eligible to do so.
Thank you for that clarification, Director Tingay. Are there any further questions? Councillor Murray.
Can I ask a question, please, Mayor, about the Australia Day committees? Are they all functioning independently at the moment, or have they been all functioning independently? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. If we look at last year, so Strathbogie had been functioning. However, they decided not to hold an Australia Day celebration event last year for a couple of reasons. One, in relation to the actual date, and also the other in concerns for COVID as well. Euroa's committee required significant support from council officers to ensure that the event could take place, and there were a number of reasons around that. And then other committees have been leading their own events throughout this year's celebrations for 2022.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Are there any further questions to the officer? No. And so we have 3 people who wish to speak to this item tonight. The first is Shirley Saywell. Can you please come forward, Shirley?
Thank you.
So you have, yes, your microphone's working. You have 5 minutes to make your submission. A bell will sound at the 4-minute mark.
Better talk fast. Thanks for the opportunity. Firstly, I want to applaud this council for being brave and bold and for listening to the community. I was one of the community members who participated in the community vision formation that now sits within the council plan. In that statement, it says we care deeply for country and First Nations people. What does that mean? Surely it's about respecting Indigenous history and taking a stand for truth. The second statement that I think is great is we are bold. I love it. I love seeing a bold council. I've been in this council room for many, many years, and this is the boldest council I've seen. So please continue to be bold. This is an opportunity for us to go ahead, for us to recognise what went before. Not 100 years or 200 years of history, but thousands of years of history. There'll be many, many hurdles. But they say if you don't use your power for positive change, you are actually part of the problem. So I just hope Council grabs this opportunity with both hands. It would show that we are a decent, mature community. Council has signed an MOU with Taungurong. Let's build on it. I was born in Kiwi country and I'm proud, I call myself an Australian, but I'm proud that New Zealand's National Day is on the day when our white forebears signed a treaty with the Maori people. It's a treaty that recognises their history and celebrates their culture. It's a day when all New Zealanders can celebrate, and they normally have a hangi, which is like an underground barbecue. Barbecues are better. And no one is offended. It's a day when commemorations are centred around the treaty, around Waitangi, but all across the country there's celebrations, there's Maori ceremonies as well as sporting events, music, parades. It's a day of real celebration, a day of joy, a day of pride, a day of cultural identity. I'm not saying New Zealand's got it all right. There's still racism and discrimination in New Zealand, but the gap is way less than it is here. They have learned about the past and they have learned from the past. They teach Maori in school. They truly celebrate their history. Ask Australians what the 26th of January is about. Most don't know. It's just another public holiday that enables them to go camping or to the beach. I don't have a problem with that. But how is that different to what we do every other bloody weekend? This is not what a national ceremony should look like. Let's start the conversation. Let's be bold. I know Council can't make it happen on their own, but it can work to shift the conversation away from what for many is a deeply offensive tradition. Most Australians do not know the basic history of Australia. They don't know how cruel and brutal the arrival of white settlers really was. They don't know what happened when the ships arrived. We cannot undo this history, but we should own it. And we should stop expecting Aboriginal people to just suck it up. When someone trashes cultural assets important to white folk or dares to disrespect Anzac Day, there's outrage. We don't tell white people to just get over it. And if we cannot understand why Australia Day is offensive to Aboriginals, we are truly blind. We have tried to erase the past, but we must honour it. Truth-telling and treaty-making and changing the date of our national celebration are steps in the right direction. For every year we accept same, we lose more of our history. We have the chance to do things better. Let's not waste it. I just finally want to say there were many people who have rung and made comments about this. COVID seems to have shut the town down. But I want to say those people share the vision of Council. Let's go after something bold. This is a great opportunity. Thank you for giving it to us, and we will help you make it a reality. We'll definitely back you. I look forward to the discussions in the coming month. Thank you.
Thank you for your submission, Shirley. Councillors, do you have any questions? Oh, you might have questions yet, Shirley. I don't know. There may be. I don't know. Do you have any is there any clarifying questions of the submitter? No? Okay, thank you. You can sit down. Sorry. You can now take your seat in the gallery, as my running notes say. Okay, the second submitter is, I've got down for Laura Baker, but she may not be here.
She did think it was happening in question time, and she missed question time, so I don't think she's here.
Right. Okay. Okay, so we will go down to our third submitter, and is Kate Orty. Kate, can you please come forward? Thank you, Kate. You have 5 minutes to make your submission.
I'll try not to take the 5 minutes. I'd like to begin by acknowledging Taungurong people. We do it at all our meetings, every meeting that we have for Euroa Connect, Euroa Energy, Strathbogie Voices, Strathbogie Inc., and we do it because we mean it. In relation to this particular opportunity that you are offering us about Australia Day, it's a gift. It's seriously a gift. It's a gift of leadership. It's a gift of ambition. It's a cultural gift. And it's the sort of thing that as a community we ought to reach out and embrace. I'm delighted to see that there's a report and there'll be a subsequent report, and we'll be making some further submissions to you as is appropriate. You've heard from Shirley. You can tell that she's passionate. If we can get passionate about Christmas decorations, I think we'll probably get very passionate about the 26th of January. It seems to me that there's already been considerable heat about this, and we shouldn't expect it to abate. And that's one of the reasons why there is an extraordinary leadership opportunity for this small council in North East Victoria about this extreme issue for many people, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal. Now, let me just say that this is not a sentimental question, and I think many people think it is. It's not sentimental. While there's lots of sentiment, that is not the issue. It's also not even necessarily about the First Fleet. It's not about the women who were brought here and used in ways that we would prefer not to remind ourselves of. It's actually about Aboriginal people's exposure to our colonial past, and we need to embrace it. Embrace it in a way that allows us to be clinical, challenge, and compassionate. It's a big word, compassionate. And I think it's important for us to understand that Aboriginal people come to this particular discussion in their own generous manner. Every time I acknowledge Aboriginal people, I do it because of their generosity, because of the way in which they are making it possible for us to be part of a conversation about what makes us a great country. I've lived and worked all over this place. I've ridden horses across the Hay Plain in midsummer. I know what this country can be, and I know what it is, and many of you do too. But here's our opportunity. Having said it's not about sentiment, let me say this. I am a historian when I'm not being a lawyer, and it's really clear that if we go and look at what the 26th of January actually means, we are going to find blood on the wattle. We're going to find rivers flowing with blood. We're going to have to ask ourselves what that means for us as a country in the 21st century. In providing you with my comments about what I think we need to do by way of the Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities, and I'm not going to talk about that today, I think that's a longer conversation and you need to think about it as a council about your obligations. I made a note that there were two particular instances that I thought we needed to take away from this conversation right now about the 26th of January. One's just up in New South Wales, and it's about what happened on the 26th of January in 1838 when Major Nunn, who had the authority of the government behind him, rode out and massacred Aboriginal people. Now, the numbers are disputed, but it was Nunn himself who said that it was between 200 and 300 people that he and his troop killed. Now, for those of you who've read history, you will know that that involves not just the mercifully quick bullet in the head. It involves the stirrup iron taken from the saddle. It involves what happens to children, and it involves what happened to women who had no part in what might have taken place that sparked Nunn's furious rage and the outcomes north of here and near Myall Creek. The other reason that I think this is an impressive time for us to be considering what we do has to do with a much more recent instance of just exactly that. In 1926, a police and civilian party rode out of Wyndham and they murdered upwards of 30 people at least. It's disputed how many people were killed, but we do know that it began with 3 women and 4 men. The women, in fact, were probably present when the men were murdered. They were each taken to separate places where they were executed and their bodies burnt, 1926. From there, 9 people were taken to another ravine not very far away by that same party, and they were also murdered and their bodies were burnt. Subsequent to that, there were 4 Aboriginal people, an elderly man who was too sick to walk, who was brought into camp being carried, and they were executed and their bodies burnt. 1926, the Kimberley, it's us. Let's think about what the 26th of January actually means, because when we do, we will all be better and greater, and this country can step into what we know needs to be our post-colonial role in respect of Aboriginal people. Be very happy to talk about the Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities another time, and that's going to be a challenge for yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, for your submission. Were there any questions of clarification from Kate? Sorry, come back.
Thanks, Kate. As someone with a legal background and an Australian historian, I guess I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, would you say the term invasion is true of even the colonial law that was stemmed in systemic racism at the time, as well as the other point of view, which is the Aboriginal point of view? I mean, yeah, do you think invasion is the right term to use for what happened on the 26th of Jan from both sides of history?
Yes.
Thank you, Kate. Councillor Rayburn.
Yes.
Sorry. Yes, Kate. Just clarification for yourself. We're about the 26th of January, but could you tell me any other date in Australian history where we could celebrate a day?
Oh, look, I think that's actually a conversation for the community. Let me tell you that as an Australian who's extraordinarily proud of this country for all sorts of other reasons, we could pick Wattle Day. We could pick any number of days that mean something to us. We could pick the Day of Federation, which is in fact the day when the nation really got underway. We could be taking a whole range of dates and thinking about it. And we need to. And when we do, we'll make better civilians or civics, we'll make better citizens of ourselves.
Are the First Nations going to be able to accept that other date? If you as an historian, I'm just clarification here. Because we are talking about First Nations, not talking about us. We're talking about First Nations. Are there any? Really, I want to understand: is there any other date that they would accept that would be relevant? Is it NARDOC week, or is it any other date which we could look at as Australians?
I'm not going to answer your question because they need to, but let me say this about getting to a date and what a date might be. We're embarked on an absolutely radical revolutionary process here with treaty. We're also engaged in truth-telling here in this part of the world. And when we get to the conversations that we have to have about that, a day will emerge, a time will emerge, an opportunity will present itself for us. And when that does, it'll come from Aboriginal people. So, Chris, while your question's to me, my answer is I'm not prepared to say it's a particular day. I can say, I love Wattle Day, good, but that's not necessarily the day that people will arrive at. And can I just say about that question, we have been very careful not to have these conversations in our country. The culture wars is constantly reverberating around these conversations, excluding us, precluding us from having these discussions. They're not easy discussions. If we really wanted to get exercised about this, we'd be asking ourselves what happened up at Benalla after the Faithful Massacre. And that's a conversation that we haven't had right here close to us. We need to have that conversation. And it's not a cop-out to say we need to either. It's not a cop-out to say I don't have a day. It's actually what we should be doing. You sit around this table, you talk to each other, you come up with disputed outcomes. You might not all agree about things, but you do. And when we're a mature country, that's what we will do. We don't do it now, and I have to say that I think one of the reasons we don't do it is because we still have an extraordinary undercurrent of racism in this country, which we need to address. Many people will disagree with me, and I'll have people talk me through that and tell me it doesn't exist. I think it exists, and I think it's one of the reasons why we do not have these discussions, and we have to.
Thank you, Kate. Are there any further questions?
Before I get up again, is there any other question?
I think you're right. Can you turn off the microphone, please?
I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I also have received a statement from Carissa Wilson, who would have been in attendance tonight but cannot attend due to illness. Carissa has asked me to read the following statement on her behalf. There are far more reasons to change the date of Australia Day from 26th of January than there are to keep it the same. The time to keep doing things the same, just because we have in the past, has to cease. There have been countless atrocities that occurred on the 26th of January for our First Nations people. In particular, the 26th of January 1788 signifies so much trauma for a group of people who have managed this landscape with such integrity and ingenuity for between tens to hundreds of thousands of years. I can't even begin to imagine how the celebration of this day must make First Nations people feel. When I have explained to children in the past what happened on the 26th of January in 1788, I have had numerous comments to the effect of, why would we ever make that date a celebration? Why wouldn't that really hurt Aboriginal people? It's always interesting to hear our youth's perspectives, as they are not yet indoctrinated in the system. If 10-year-olds can understand why this date might be offensive to celebrate, then I really hope that the broader community can too. Thank you, Carissa, and sorry you're unwell. I hope you get better. Councillors, that is the end of the submissions. So I will ask councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Hayes-Burke.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the motion on page 81 of the agenda that seeks to go out for community consultation on the two options that are mentioned there. One's to leave 26th of Jan as it is, and the other is to go down a process of acknowledge our community in a more respectful way.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Murray. Thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? Thank you. Councillor Hayes-Burke, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to speak tonight about why I requested this report, and it came out of discussions with the community, and we've already spoken about that. That was the community panel who put together the community vision back in August last year. That was an independently recruited group of people from this community. Everyone in the community had the opportunity to put their hand up, and that group was recruited independently. They had different viewpoints and they came from totally different backgrounds. And I just want to read to you now, which Shirley's already read to a part of it, but the community vision, because I think it's pertinent in this discussion. So I'll just read it again now. The Shire of Strathbogie is a region of natural beauty with vibrant communities who are respectful, optimistic and inclusive. We have a strong sense of belonging and of our collective history. We care deeply for country and First Nations people. We are bold, we embrace opportunities and we welcome you. Now, Council used the very best practice deliberative engagement and to formulate that community vision, and our job as councillors is to deliver that vision for the community. So the community's basically told us what they want, is my view. I just want to highlight again, respectful, optimistic and inclusive, and caring deeply for country and First Nations people, and being bold, as Shirley stated earlier. I'm proud to be a bold council with my fellow councillors. We signed the MOU with the Tungarang Land and Water Council, and that speaks about truth-telling and reconciliation, and we are in discussions with Yorta Yorta to hopefully do the same one day. This is just a step along that journey. I'm also fearful, as Kate mentioned, that if we don't do anything, we'll be breaching the Charter of Human Rights, the Victorian Charter of Human Rights, which is a concern for me because I know that the Ombudsman takes that very seriously. So, I mean, I think here we're just taking a very soft approach. We're going out to the community to have this discussion. We're not cancelling Australia Day. That's up, the community can celebrate that if they wish, but hopefully we'll start the conversation and hopefully educate the community about what the true history is for Aboriginal people. So please, councillors, I ask you well, I think that you're all on board anyway, but to show leadership and show respect to all Australians, in particular the first Australians.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Councillor Murray, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. This motion really is about engaging with our community, and it's really about getting some feedback from our community and starting that conversation, or that process of having a conversation about what is quite a difficult topic and will be a difficult topic over the coming months. And I suppose it will leave us with difficult decisions in the end. But you know, that's the job, I think, that we as councillors have, to be responsive to the needs of the community and to try and make decisions for the benefit of the community, both now and in the future. And I'm loath to shirk that responsibility, and sort of I think what we should be doing is going out to the community and getting feedback on it. And I know it'll be difficult, I know it'll be challenging, but I think it's a conversation that we need to have, and it's a conversation, I think, that we're respectful enough and we're in a position where we can have it. So I'm confident that we can have that conversation in a respectful manner, and we can get some input and some direction about what we need to do and what the way forward is. Not only from the Taungurung people as well, because I understand we haven't got feedback at the moment from them, at least in a formal way. So I'm looking forward to that. But I'm also looking forward to getting feedback from lots of our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Would anyone opposing the motion like to speak? Councillor Dickinson?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Fundamentally, I have no argument with all of the speakers, but only once during this time I've heard the word Taungurung mentioned. I don't have a position on whether we should change what we do on the 26th of January. I don't think that it's a simplistic answer. And before we even attempt to think about it, we need to engage in proper consultation with the Taungurung people. I believe this was the response of councillors when it was first raised. We owe it to them. It's our duty to listen to them first. By going directly to the general community before hearing from the original owners of this land, we're showing disrespect for them. The Taungurung elders are the people who will make their views known to their people, and these people will be guided by the elders. To hear the views of the Taungurung people, we would be in a better position to make an informed decision as to what should be done with the celebration of 26th of January, known as Australia Day. We can't bulldoze our way through this. It's complex, it needs extensive consultation. It should be driven by the Taungurung people, not council.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Would anyone like to speak in favour of the motion? As the mover of the motion, would you like to exercise your right of reply, Councillor Hayes-Burke?
I just want to, I guess, acknowledge what Councillor Dickinson said. We did actually get verbal agreement from Taungurung Land Water Council from one of the directors who had a conversation with the CEO there, and I think we can take that verbal conversation as a sort of not approval, I guess, because we're not seeking approval. It's our duty to change this date that's disrespectful. They're not going to tell us, oh, you don't celebrate that day. This is our duty to show respect. So I think that we have had the conversation with them, and we can't just expect them to work in a world that suits colonial people as ourselves, because they don't work in a world that is steeped in institutional racism. So, I mean, yeah, I think that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. You don't get to respond, unfortunately, in this forum. You've had your chance to speak, and the only person that can speak twice is the mover of the motion. Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. I will now put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour of the motion? And against? And I declare the motion carried. Thank you, councillors. We will now ask Councillor Hourigan to rejoin the meeting. And thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hourigan, for returning. We're at page 88 of the agenda, item 9.3.1, contract variation CN 21-22-30, upgrade Nagambie solar pump at McGregor Avenue. Director Tingay, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. This report seeks council approval to vary contract 2021-2022-30 from the original amount of $152,946 to $200 and, or I might just wait for those.
Yes.
Thank you.
If anyone wishes to leave the gallery, you're welcome to do so. Thank you.
I'll take it from the top.
Sure, thanks, Samantha. Thank you, Director Tingay.
Thank you, Mayor Binks. This report seeks council approval to vary contract 2021-2022-30 from the original amount of $152,946 to $200. And sorry for 200. I can't even speak now. Anyway, sorry, that was the last big agenda item. The variation is required due to the revised scope of works as the depth and quantity of silt that was required to be removed from the retention basin was greater than that assumed in the original design. A comprehensive investigation of underground condition wasn't carried out prior to the design due to the water being retained within the basin. Therefore, the accurate amount was unknown at the time of design. So hence this request for budget variation to be considered by council tonight. Thank you, Mayor Binks.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer? No?
Thanks, everyone.
It's not that funny. Okay. Oh, Councillor Rayburn.
Just a clarification, if I may, Director Tingay, if you get your tongue around to $220,286. Is this going to help flood mitigation for around that area?
So this is around. So basically, it's going to help with the retention basin that we require. It is obviously in the adopted budget, and it's obviously in regards to the solar pump to be able to help transition that water. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Were there any other clarifying questions? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Murray.
I'd like to move that we adopt or accept the contract variation for the Nagambie solar pump as listed on page 88.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Rayburn, thank you. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Councillor Murray, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Councillor Rayburn. Okay, would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Can I have put the motion to a vote? Can I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We're now on to page 93, item 9.3.2, contract variation CN 21-22-30, 06, the 2021 to 2022 Roads Reseal Program. Director Tingay, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. This report seeks council approval for a variation to our roads reseal program. The need for this variation has stemmed from a section of road at Upton Road that has been identified for resealing during an inspection, and also the adjustment for spray rate difference between the design rate at tender versus the actual rate that was applied during the works. So there is a recommendation comment on page 93 for council's consideration.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Are there any questions to the officer? Councillor Murray.
Could I ask why the spray rate would vary between their tender and the actual?
Thank you, Councillor Murray. May have been the purchase price of the material has gone up as a result of a number of increases that we're seeing to materials and supplies across the board for a number of different items at the moment.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Any further questions? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the recommendation on page 93 of the agenda be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Rayburn. Is there any opposition? Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Andrews?
No, thank you, Mayor. I think it's been explained properly.
Thank you. Councillor Rayburn.
Just for clarifications for people listening in the gallery and on the screen, it's a variation as the tender went out in February 21 and the works weren't done until 2022. So under COVID, we did expect prices to rise.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? No. Councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against, and I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to page 97, 9.3.3, contract number 2122 to 23, tender process for construction of Violet Town landfill rehabilitation, reduction of mandatory pricing and regional benefit evaluation weightings. Director Tingay, can we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor Binks. I'll just handball that over to Director Roth.
Director Roth, I thought that was interesting, but yeah, you never know. Thanks, Director Roth.
I'll receive the handball because we're genuinely excited because the Violet Town landfill rehabilitation is out for tender at the minute.
Woo.
And we did have an inspection from potential tenderers the other day and we did have some turn up, so that's great. So because of the size of the job and the complexity, we've engaged a probity advisor to just help us through the process to make sure we're ticking the proper boxes. And because of the nature of the project, the recommendation has been to reduce our normal price weighting to 40% for that and from 10 to 5 for local regional benefit, because it's likely that most of the tenderers would come from the metropolitan area, and the balance of the 55% weighting would go to quality, previous experience and commitment to one-time delivery. So that, because it's a variation to our normal process, it needs to have council sign off.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Director Roth. Were there any clarifying questions for the officer? No? Okay. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Oh, Councillor Rayburn.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the recommendation on page 97 be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hayes-Burke. Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Rayburn?
Thank you, Mayor. This is something that's been a liability to this council for how long, David? 30 years? 35 then. So it's great to us to be finally under the EPA directions to going out and be able to look at how we can fix this issue for our Shire as a community asset that is now causing us a lot of duress. It's part of, we were talking before about our going forward with our climate action plan and how we develop that further. This landfill is probably costing us about 33% of our carbon footprint. That's a massive amount of money that, and for us to be able to go forward as trying to be a carbon neutral council. So this is a great way. I hope all we can do is the EPA agree with what we're doing, because this is all under the guidance of the EPA. We are doing this because council tried to do it 10, 15 years ago and was not complete in what they did. Hopefully at this moment we will do it successful and the people of this community will be able to go forward without this burden on their shoulders ever again.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Councillor Hesberg, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, this is a good example of a project that it was delayed because I think previous councils feared for making a decision about it. So I commend the previous council to us for committing to reducing the impact of this landfill on the environment and doing what we need to do under the EPA guidelines. And I appreciate officers seeing the need to change the procurement policy here, because we do need someone who has the expertise and is going to deliver this project on time. So I can see that that's really important here.
Thank you, Councillor Hesberg. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? No. Okay, councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? Thank you. Councillors against? None. I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We're now moving on to page 100, item 9.3.4, contracts and purchases awarded under delegation. Director Ting, this is you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Binks.
May we have a summary?
Thank you. We share the report, but I'll do the talking on this one.
Sure.
So this report provides information to council, but also the broader community on a number of contracts that have been awarded under delegation. And when we talk about awarded under delegation, that is either by the CEO, a director or a manager in line with their approved delegations. This report covers a number of projects. I won't go into detail in case councillors want to share that information verbally with the community, but there is a recommendation commencing on page 100 of the agenda for council's consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Tingay. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer?
Director Tingay, I should probably know this, but with the Euroa Sale Yards money for removal of the concrete and trees, what's proposed with that space exactly?
Their work, through you, Mayor, their work's in conjunction with the construction of the truck wash, which is funded in the coming budget.
Yep, I thought so.
And it's also federal money, so we need to expend it.
Yep.
Thank you, Director Roth. Were there any further questions to that item? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Dickinson. It is.
I'd like to move the motion on page 100.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Do I have a seconder to the motion? Councillor Murray. Thank you. Is there any opposition? Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Dickinson? Councillor Murray?
If I could, I'm just really excited to see the streetscape developments going, but in Longwood and Avenel and Uriah, I think. So this marks the beginning of that, seeing something on the ground. And I note that already in Longwood there's a bit happening, so that's really exciting. So, yeah, it's terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Hayes-Burke.
Thanks, Mayor. I think, I really like these reports because the community can see that we are being transparent about how the tenders are going and also keep updated of projects. So it's a great example of transparency. And that is exciting that the streetscapes projects, which have been highly anticipated, will get going soon.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? No. Councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour? And against? And declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We are now moving on to item 9.4.1 on page 106 of the agenda, the Strathbogie Shire Council Audit and Risk Committee unconfirmed minutes of the meetings held on Friday the 11th of March 2022, Friday the 25th of March 2022 and Thursday the 7th of April 2022. Director Roth, can we have a summary, please?
Thank you, Mayor. As you can see, the Audit Committee have been busy. We've had 3 meetings in the last couple of months. The first one was specifically to look at the draft strategic risk register, which Director Bro's had a lot to do with, which has come up really well. The normal meeting on the 25th of March, which included the attendance of the external auditor. We have a new contractor, so we're just talking through the audit strategy for this year, which is underway. And then in April, the committee reviewed the draft budget and financial plan. So it's there for your information.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer? Yes.
Director Roth, are you happy with the new external auditors?
So far, we're just working through the process with them. They've been out for the interim audit and we're just waiting for the report to see what they've picked up from that. So far, so good.
Thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, can I have a motion, please? And can you state what your motion is? Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to move that we note the recommendation on page 106 of the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Hourigan, thank you. Is there any opposition? Councillor Murray, would you like to speak to the item? Councillor Hourigan, would you like to speak to the item? Would any other councillor like to speak to the item? No. I will just make a comment from the chair to this item. The Audit and Risk Committee is a really important committee of council, and I attended one of these meetings in the absence of councillors being able to attend, and I just really commend to the community the work that the Audit and Risk Committee do for council. It's incredibly important, and their expert advice and guidance in this area is greatly appreciated and makes us for a really strong and robust council. So thank you to them. Better write my name down where I spoke. I will now put the motion to the vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We're now moving on to page 109, item 9.4.2, financial report to the 31st of March 2022. Director Roth, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. So the report's there to the end of March, which at that stage was pretty well on track. In attachment 1, there's a number of graphs there for your information. One of the interesting ones, if you look at the rate debtors comparison, so that's the amount of outstanding rates. At the end of March, look, we levied probably an extra $460,000 in revenue in the budget this year compared to last, but the debtors were only 30,000 higher. So there's been some really good collection, and only today I've seen the April figures, and the amount outstanding at the end of April is $347,000 below what it was at the same time last year. And we have a small team of 2 in the rates department, helped out by customer service, and they've done a really good job over the last couple of years to look at recovering some debts that have been outstanding for quite some time. And yeah, I'd just like to say what a great job they're doing. So,
thank you, Director Roth. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer? No? Councillors, can I have a motion, and can you state what your motion is, please? Councillor Dickinson?
The motion is as per page 109, and I move it.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Horrigan, thank you. Is there any opposition? No. Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Dickinson?
Well done, Officer Roth, and your staff.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillors, I will now put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We are now up to page 111 of the agenda, item 9.5.1, draft motion relating to the mandatory candidate training Municipal Association of Victoria State Conference. Director Bray, may we have a summary, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Every year the Municipal Association of Victoria has an annual conference, and that's to be held on the 24th of June this year. The purpose of the meeting is for the MAV to give councils an update on all of their activities and all of the lobbying activities that they're undertaking on behalf of councils across Victoria. But councils can also put up motions that are of relevance to the sector, and they can put those forward. They require a council resolution to do so, and we've got a form that we have to fill out, and we also have to comply with their rules around putting up a motion. We have one vote on the council, and that's held by the Mayor, and the CEO is also able to sit on the floor of the council while the procedures are undertaken. In terms of this council wanted to put up a motion in relation to something that we raised through our submission to the local government, Victoria's local government culture project that was recently out for consultation. We highlighted the need for incoming councillors or candidates to undertake a very intensive education program about what it means to be a councillor, because the new Local Government Act 2020 makes the role of councillor a very complex one, and I think a lot of councillors are finding it difficult to raise to the level of the bar that's set by that new act. And we now have over 21 municipal monitors across the state assisting councils with that transition to the new act and the new role that they play, which, as I said, is a very complex one. So this council has been very strong in saying that there needs to be more training before people stand for council, so that people are aware about the complexity of being a councillor. The other thing that we also asked for in our submission that we're putting up to the MAV State Council, if a motion's passed tonight, is around the induction training. So every council pays for and prepares their own induction of their own council. which is incredibly expensive. It also means councils are doing different things at different times. So we're saying that the state government should actually pay for that induction and run the induction, particularly on a regional basis, so that councillors can develop relationships between other councils in the same region. They get the same messages and the same training at the same time. And certainly individual councils can then augment that with their own procedures and policies as well. So councillors, on page 112 is a recommendation that we put those two things to the State Council, given we believe that it is of sector-wide importance. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Bray. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer? No. Councillors, can I have a motion, and can you state what your motion is, please? Councillor Rayburn.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move a motion to accept the recommendation on page 112 to the Council endorse the following motion to the Municipal Association of the State of Victoria. Move that way.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Murray. Is there any opposition to the motion? Councillor Rayburn, would you like to speak to the motion?
100%. As a councillor taking on the mayoralship last year, with 6 new councillors coming on to the around the table, with not a lot of knowledge on how to go from being an activist to an advocate, it makes it very difficult to be able to work on how to go forward. People have to remember, and always should remember, that when you are a councillor, you are a board member, you are the strategic planner of the Shire. You're not the day-to-day runner of the Shire. You do not get involved in the day-to-day running of a Shire. All you do is look at the strategic and directions to give to the officers and the CEO on where we go forward. And that's why at the moment there's 21 shires in the state of Victoria have got municipal monitors in there, because the training prior to becoming a councillor is not there. People do not understand and don't get the opportunity to understand what the governance rules and the real direction of what a councillor is about. And we, I'll have to say it, we last year made a decision which I think will change the whole concept of how local government will go forward, and this is part of that, is we were the only shire in the state of Victoria ever to ask for a municipal monitor. The government didn't direct us to have one because we believed that we were just not quite on the right tram of how to go forward in our governance. And what this is talking about here is to make sure that when people do become councillors, they understand what the real responsibilities of a councillor is. And I support this 100%.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Councillor Murray, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I'd just like to endorse really what Councillor Rayburn was talking about. There are two parts to this. It's talking about as candidates, we need some sort of better training and certification program that's actually so that we know what we're doing before actually we get here. And then once we're here, once we're elected, then we also need some sort of training which is statewide, which is consistent, which is detailed and appropriate, and which doesn't cost us an arm and a leg. And I think this is really what that's all about.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horrigan.
Thanks, Mayor Binks. Not necessarily speak to the motion. I just want to clarify, Councillor Rayburn, that we didn't write to the monitor as a whole as councillors. So it wasn't an individual choice to ask the monitor to come in, whilst I recognise that the Mayor had wrote to the monitor to come in. So just clarifying.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Did anyone else wish to speak to the motion? No? Would you like to exercise your right of reply, Chris? Okay, thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Councillors, I will now put the motion to the vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? And against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to page 117, 9.5.2, Mayor and Councillor expense request. Councillors, I have declared a material conflict of interest in this matter, which means I need a procedural motion for Deputy Mayor Murray to take the chair for this item. Can I have a motion, please? Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Can you just move the motion?
I move the motion to have Deputy Mayor chair the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes-Burke. Is there a seconder? Councillor Horrigan, thank you. I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And declare that carried. Thank you. I will leave the meeting and hand the chair to Deputy Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll just wait for the Mayor to exit. And for the doors to close. There we go. All right, Director Bray, may we have a summary of the report, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Chair, all of the above. We have another conference. This is the Australian Local Government Association conference that's held usually annually post or pre-COVID in Canberra. This year it's for 3 days during June. The theme is Partners in Progress, and it's basically a collection of all of the local governments from across Australia that descend on Canberra to talk about various issues around different themes. They do networking, catch up with local politicians and federal politicians as well, which might actually be interesting given it will be after the election at the end of this week. So it basically, what they're saying in terms of the Partners in Progress, it talks about the important role local government plays in building a stronger, more inclusive and more sustainable Australia, and its role in working with other governments, other levels of governments to support community outcomes and also the nation's recovery post-COVID. So the Mayor, Councillor Binks and Councillor Rayburn have expressed their interest to attend the conference. Under our council expenses policy, any conference that's held interstate and also that's over $1,500 must come to council for a resolution. So this item is in accordance with that policy. So there's a recommendation on page 117 that talks that asks for endorsement for their attendance at the conference, to also fund the conference registration and transport and accommodation and meal expenses. And again, we've tried to find the most cost-effective way of getting two councillors up to Canberra, which is basically driving in a council car, and to provide the funding for $2,768.80 for Mayor Binks, which includes all of that accommodation and conference attendance, and $2,732.80 for Councillor Rayburn. And in accordance with the expenses policy, Council requires a report back on their attendance, what they learned and how their attendance was of benefit to the local community. So, Mayor, I've put that to Council for their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bray. Councillors, are there any further questions of the officer? All right, then I'll get somebody to put the motion, and can you state what your motion is, please? Councillor Horrigan.
Thank you. I would like to move a motion that we adopt the recommendation on page 117 of the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Hayes-Burke. Is there any opposition? Councillor Horrigan, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. I would like to speak to the motion. This is really important for our Shire to attend these events so that they can advocate on our behalf, and that's why I am supporting that they go into attendance. When they do return, they will give us an update on how it went, and they will also let us know whether it's something that they want to continue. Thanks.
All right. Sorry?
Something's burning in the kitchen. Yeah, something's burning in the kitchen.
We'll just keep going until we find out otherwise. Councillor Hayes-Burke, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just to note that historically this has been something that we've attended, and it's really important that we have representation at, because we get to get under ministers' noses and pass on our demands for the municipality, and hopefully if we ask enough they'll just want to tick us off and give us the money. So thanks.
Does any other councillor wish to make a comment? Councillor Horrigan, would you like to respond? All right, then I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? I declare it carried. So we'll invite the Mayor back in.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Murray, for chairing the meeting whilst I had to observe that conflict. We are now at... Okay. Yeah, do. Ooh. We all right? Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay, we're now up to page 122 of the agenda, item 9.5.3, monthly performance report. Director Bray, may we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Marion. It's actually nice to have a gallery to talk to about this, because usually the gallery is empty by the time we get to this report. So this report we put together to give a few indicators around how we're performing and how things are going. And so yet again this month, the month of April, or last month of April, we had building permits totalling over $7 million. So again, it was another huge year or month of investment across the Shire. And I won't pick out individual wards in terms of who's leading the table and not, because we govern for all. In terms of, and a lot of it, if you look on page 124, again, it's really led by residential development and subdivision. On page 125, we've got the planning permits that have been determined in the month of April. And again, it's very high, showing the growth across the Shire is continuing at nearly $2 million. In terms of customer requests, we've had a lot of requests come in, and I think we've also had quite a bit of activity around planning permit inquiries again, which again reflects the fact that we've got a lot of growth happening. And also...
It's exhaust fan.
And also in terms of... there's also been a lot of requests around planning compliance and also local laws and environmental health as well. So all of those supporting things around development services. In terms of waste collection tonnages, there's been a slight increase in the amount of waste that we've generated across the Shire this month compared to previous months. And the diversion rate, the contamination rate is also down a little bit as well, but we're still under 2% contamination rate, which is a fantastic result. That's one of the best results across Victoria in terms of the low contamination that we have in our waste system. So, pending no further disasters in the kitchen, Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Director Bray, and well held in a slight drama happening off to the side. Councillors, are there any questions of the officer regarding the monthly performance report? No? Councillors, can I have a motion, please, and can you state what your motion is? Councillor Haysbert?
I pass a motion that the report be noted.
Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Murray? Is there any opposition to the motion? No. Would you like to speak to the report, Councillor Haysbert?
I think Director Bray covered everything. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Murray, would you like to speak to the report?
Only to thank Director Bray and all the officers really and staff for getting through a busy month. It's obviously lots happening, and I do note that Hughes Creek's doing very well. The top of the pop, so thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the report? Councillors, I'll put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour, please? Against? And I declare that carried. Thank you, councillors. We now move on to page 139 of the agenda, and we're at item 9.6.1, Strathbogie Shire brand renewal. Executive Manager Favaloro, can we have a summary of this report, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Action 1.1.5 of the Council Plan is to prepare and adopt a Strathbogie Shire brand strategy. So that action was included after 9 months of community engagement to develop our Council Plan and community vision. So the aim of the design presented tonight is to reflect our community's vision for the future. So tonight's report also notes the expenditure of $60,000 in the current budget for town entry signage. And so, councillors, there's a recommendation for you on page 139 of tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Manager Favaloro. Councillors, are there any questions to the officer? Councillors, can I have a motion, and can you state your motion? Councillor Rayburn, you can move it. You can do it in once. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation on page 139. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor Haysbert. Thank you, Councillor Haysbert. Is there any opposition to the motion?
Sorry, can I just clarify something?
Yep.
Because I'd like to make an alternative recommendation. Am I allowed to do that now, or do I have to wait?
I'll get our guidance from our governance officer.
Yeah, so we have a motion that's on the table in terms of moving and seconding, and so we need to debate that unless you're seeking to move an amendment to that motion.
An amendment to the motion.
Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder, so you can put your amendment and the Mayor can ask if the mover and seconder agree. If they don't have to, but the motion, your amendment would need a seconder, and then we could debate, and so that's the one that we debate, and then we vote on that amendment. If that gets up, then that becomes the motion on the table. If it isn't voted up, then we go back to the original that was moved as per the recommendation in the papers. Is that clear, councillors?
Okay, so thank you for clarifying. So I'd like to make an amendment that Council defer the consideration of this report to provide time for officers to develop a methodology and project timelines for going to tender for the development of a new branding strategy by an external consultant, ensuring a community engagement process is undertaken by the consultant prior to the presentation of final branding options to Council.
So, councillors, can I just clarify? So that's not an amendment to the motion. Yeah, that's a new motion. So if it was adding another point or changing some words within the motion that's been put, then that's an amendment, but that's actually a different motion altogether. So we need to go back to debating the original motion, which was the recommendation a recommendation on page 139, moved by Councillor Rayburn, seconded by Councillor Haysbert.
Can Councillor Hourigan foreshadow to defer the motion as part of her debate? Is that where
Councillor
it would happen?
Can certainly foreshadow that she, if this motion is lost, that she will foreshadow a separate motion.
Right. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm still learning. So, during the debate, I will say that I foreshadow. Thank you.
Through the council, through the mayor, you've foreshadowed the motion that you would go to. So if councillors are understanding what that foreshadowed motion is, we can continue with the debate of the motion that's on the table.
Yes, Councillor Murray.
Could I ask Councillor Hourigan again to read her foreshadowed motion?
Thank you. That council defer the consideration of this report to provide time for officers to develop a methodology and project timelines for going to tender for the development of a new branding strategy by an external consultant, ensuring a community engagement process is undertaken by the consultant prior to the presentation of final branding options to council.
Okay, so I need some guidance here too, because this is different process.
So back to the mover.
So
for the original motion, which was the as per the recommendation on page 1.
So would Councillor Rayburn like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would. This motion or this recommendation, which is before us, actually.
Yeah, shouldn't you have asked anyone against?
I did ask, sorry, I did, and yes, but I did ask, and I will clarify again, yes. Is there anyone opposing the motion? Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor, we're getting there. Councillor Rayburn, would you like to...
Sorry, Mayor Binks, just quickly, I just want to clarify, Paul looked a bit confused then. I'm opposing the recommendation that Councillor Rayburn has proposed, not what I've foreshadowed.
Yes.
No.
But
no.
They are demonstrating their opposition to the motion that Councillor Rayburn has moved and Councillor Haysbert has seconded.
So through the mayor, so that's done so that so in the governance rules, we have to go backwards and forwards between those in opposition, those for a motion. So it's so that the chair knows who to go to in alternate.
Councillor Rayburn, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I would love to. This recommendation, to be very, very honest and frank, should not be here. It should be just an operational duty of the CEO, of the officers doing their job. When we had residents come up before and talk about the council plan and all that, this was put up on the council plan by our community to look at rebranding our town, our shire. We had the community there to discuss this, and we passed it in our council plan, as executive manager did state. The $60,000 which is stated here is always in our budget to upgrade our signages throughout the Shire. There's no extra $60,000 been allocated to this. It's part of our normal maintenance cost. of upgrading signage around our Shire. Next year's budget is another $60,000, which is our normal running cost of upgrading signage. There's nothing in this that's going to cost us extra. All the work which has been done on this is being done in-house by our graphic designers, which we now employ at a saving for our community. And to look at how this is going to change all the signages around town, I believe it is going to be a benefit. Now, when we were talking about before about the signs, the VC signs at the start of each part of the Shire on the Hume Freeway, in my real benefit, I believe that should be moved to Euroa, to show Euroa is where the 3 people are. So when visitors come to our Shire, they know Euroa has got the 3 gentlemen who have won the VC, not the Shire. We haven't won it. We haven't got it. Euroa's got it. So that's the reason why I believe this motion should go through.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. Councillor Haysbrook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I just concur with Councillor Rayburn that we're not proposing to remove the VC signage. I mean, that can continue to be a draw card for Euroa, but we do govern for the entire Shire. So we want a brand that represents the Shire. And this is a corporate brand, which is something that, yeah, it is in the jurisdiction of the CEO. It's really not for something for council to discuss. And we will discuss with the community when it comes to preparing the individual township signs, and we'll talk about colours and what suits each individual community. So that's when the community will have an opportunity to really engage. We have taken this to the advisory panel for arts and culture. We've discussed the rebranding with Taungurung Nation, and we've had hundreds of conversations with the community. Designers, they take a brief, they do engagement, they take a brief, and then they come up with a design. So we need to respect that this is being done by professional designers. I mean, everyone in the community will have an opinion if you go out to the community with something like this. For example, Wangaratta, they decided to do a rebranding strategy. It cost them $140,000. I mean, I don't think that the Shire, the community here, would be very comfortable with us just going and spending $140,000 on that. So as Councillor Rayburn said, we really are doing this in the most cost-effective way for the community, and our job, as we've heard from our municipal monitor, our job is to deliver the council plan. So the debate about rebranding should have happened when we decided to put that as an action in the council plan. And we've heard that loud and clear from our municipal monitor, who's there to guide us, and we've heard that from the CEO. So, I mean, if we don't support this branding tonight, that'll be going against all advice that we've had, and that's professional advice that we really need to respect. So, sorry, I'm on my high horse. And so, I urge my fellow councillors to be bold, show leadership, and take this brand that is flexible. It's got various elements that we can use. We can use beautiful imagery from the Shire. There's a lot of opportunities with this, and I think when the community sees it being rolled out, I think that they'll be pleasantly surprised.
Thank you, Councillor Haysbrook. Would anyone opposing the motion like to speak? Councillor Berrigan.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I think it's important that we have a look at the council plan that was created, and we did have a lot of community that came and they engaged and they spoke about it, and the community, our council plan at the moment has 90 key initiatives, 90 plus key objectives and key initiatives that we have to complete. During those meetings, I can see that one of them, which is item 1.1.5 on there, is to prepare and adopt a Strathbogie Shire brand strategy. So out of this out of this council plan, it just says to prepare and adopt a Strathbogie Shire brand strategy. It doesn't talk about what that brand strategy looks to every member of our community. I hear that we're talking about the VC. Now, I have to draw your attention to the agenda of the night and the attachment that came with it for the branding strategy. And I'll just go to the page number 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4th page, it says Shire entry signage. Existing Shire entry signage is the VC, and the proposed new one is the Welcome to Strathbogie that's in purple lettering with the new sign. I think that that is something that needs to be consulted. That signage was created not that long ago. The Shire of Strathbogie, we paid for that signage not so long ago. That was community consultation that was involved in there. When we're talking about the monetary amount for updating the signage, we're talking about not the brand strategy. We're talking about updating the entry signage. Currently, even just for Euroa, we have 2 different signs. We have the old Shire sign, which I can't see in here, and then we have the logo behind you. And now we're proposing a 3rd one in the brand strategy. It has me a little bit confused. Also, with the council plan, it says prepare and adopt a Strathbogie Shire strategy, and then it tells you that there's a related strategic focus area on it, which is number 6, and that talks about accountable, transparent and responsible. One of the points in there is to maximise public transparency and accountability around our performance and decision-making processes. I just can't see how we've achieved that in this particular target with it. I have to oppose this recommendation because I feel that we needed to engage broadly on the design with our community, and I feel like in this particular case we have definitely missed the mark in doing so. I also take on board Councillor Hayes-Burke's recommendation and Councillor Rayburn talking about how this is operational. Well, then why is it in an agenda for us to vote on tonight? I'd like to thank the community who have made the submissions in relation to this item. There's been over 30 written submissions to us councillors. We have a duty. We were elected to listen to our community. It's very rare that we receive this many emails. So whilst Mayor Binks is asking who's opposed and who's for, I'm urging all my councillors to reconsider what their position is when they come to voting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horrigan. Is there anyone speaking in support of the motion? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a few points here, and I don't really want to go down rabbit holes, and there's a lot of rabbit holes here sort of appearing from everywhere about VC winners and all sorts of things, which really haven't got a lot of relevance to what we're talking about, a brand and a branding strategy. It's not really part of the conversation. It's another conversation. It's an important conversation, but it oughtn't be pulled into this one. Have we got a marketing problem in the Shire? Yes, we have. We've had it for a long period of time. We're sort of unrecognised and unvalued, in the state in terms of our marketing and so on. Did we need to do something about it? Yes, we did. Did the community come along and say we need to do something about it? Yes, they did. They've clearly said we need to come up with a new branding strategy and develop something. So that's what happened. We came up with a brand and a strategy. It wasn't a colouring competition. We didn't go out to people and say, can you develop one for us? We could have done that. That would be another path perhaps people could have taken, but we didn't. We did it in-house. We came up with a thing. We responded to what the need was and to what our community said we ought to be doing, and we went ahead and did it. I think we ought to just, accept what we've done, and I know there are lots of people who, I'm not a designer, lots of people have got different ideas of how they might design something, but I trust the experts in this and the people who are paid to do it, and I trust them to do a good job, and I believe they have done a good job for us. Have we got lots of different signs? Yes, we have got lots of different signs. Do we need to actually streamline some of the way in which we promote ourselves? Yes, we do. We do need to do that. And okay, we've got to replace some things, but we just need to move on and do it. So I recommend this motion to everybody, and I hope you can get behind the Shire and the good work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Would anyone opposing the motion like to speak? Councillor Dickinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm voting against the motion because I believe it's not needed at this time when it was only 5 or 6 years ago that funds were spent on exactly this. Why do we need to rebrand at considerable expense when there are so many other pressing issues, such as the condition of some of our roads? For example, I drive from Nagambie to Euroa quite regularly along the Nagambie-Loxley Road, and it's literally riddled with potholes. I'd also like to see money spent on our rubbish removal system. On a regular basis, I walk along High Street, Nagambie, see rubbish bins overflowing, particularly during an event or a long weekend. These are basic issues that need our immediate attention. To be outlaying $60,000 on rebranding is ill-advised. The supposed benefits do not justify the expense.
Thank you, Councillor Dickinson. Councillor Andrews, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My opposition to the branding is well known, and I've voiced that for some time. I believe I have a responsibility to the ratepayers to spend their dollars widely, and that's part of my function here in the council is to ensure that happens. More often than not, a rebranding is a pointless exercise, administrative exercise, where there's no value for money, there's no benefit to the greater community at all. As Councillor Dixon has said, it was only 6 or 7 years ago that the new branding was pushed through and thought to be the greatest thing of all time then, and very suitable for our community. All of a sudden it's not. I don't think it's run its course, and certainly there is a time where you must review what you've got there, but that time's not up at this stage, I'd propose. Rebranding is very expensive. The $60,000 brought up is for signage maintenance, I believe. The rebranding goes beyond that, and that cost hasn't been advised to me. I think it's going to be a large cost. Everyone I've spoken to who has been involved in rebranding is talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. So as a small committee, I don't think there's a need to do that. I think what we have now is defines the area sufficiently, and whether you love or hate the current branding, is that a reason to change it? So I'd say I object to the, or put my objection forward to the motion, and I don't believe it's going to benefit the community in any way, which is my main concern. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Rayburn, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
I do.
Thank you.
Disappointed, I'll be very honest, I'm very disappointed in councillors scaremongering to our community. The $60,000 is already allocated in our budget. It's not another $60,000 being plucked out of the bloody air to do it. It's $60,000 which is already there to upgrade our signage. We are just going to put in a new sign with the new logos on it, not go out and spend another $60,000 on new logos. It's already in our plan. Our in-house people are going to do the plans. Our in-house people are going to control it. And the only money will be expended is by us as councillors when we do the budget. If we want to go up from 60,000 to 100,000, whatever it is, that is our decision around this table. We have not allocated any extra money to do this. This is all in-house, and the scaremongering which has been stated around this table is ill-founded and incorrect. So I recommend this motion to go forward.
Thank you, Councillor Rayburn. So I'm just clarifying, I now put this motion, which is the motion on the table, to the vote. Is that correct, Governor? Thank you, Governess. Governance officer. Governance officer. Thank you. In that, councillors, I will put the motion to a vote. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour of the motion? And against? I declare the motion carried. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you. I'll please call a division on that one.
Sure.
Thank you.
You can. Can I see a show of hands for all those in favour? Councillor Hayes-Burke, Councillor Rayburn, Councillor Murray, Councillor Binks. All those in against? Councillor Dickinson, Councillor Andrews, Councillor Hourigan. Thank you, councillors. I now move on to page 145 of the agenda, notices of motion. CEO Salomon, can you please outline any notices of motion you have received?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, I have not received any notices of motion for tonight's meeting.
Following that, are there any notices of rescission?
Through you, Mayor, no, there are none.
Following that, is there any urgent business that needs attending this evening?
Again, through you, Mayor, there is no urgent business tonight.
Thank you, CEO Salomon. Is there any confidential business that needs to be considered?
Once again, through you, Mayor, no, there is no confidential business to consider in the agenda tonight.
Thank you, CEO Salomon. Councillors, the next meeting of Council is the extraordinary meeting scheduled to be held on Tuesday, 7th of June 2022, commencing at 4 p.m. This meeting will be to hear submissions to Council's draft 2022 to 23 budget and the draft 2022 to 2023 financial plan and the draft 2022 to 2023 fees and charges and the 2021 to 2025 council plan update. The next monthly meeting of the Strathbogie Shire Council is scheduled to be held on Tuesday the 21st of June 2022 at the Aroa Community Conference Centre commencing at 6 p.m. There being no further business, I declare the meeting is closed at 8:45 p.m. Thank you, councillors, officers and the gallery.